Hello? Hello, my name is Marcin Benke. I work in the research and development group of the Golem project. And one of the main interests of our group is economy of decentralized markets. And today I want to talk about our recent work on pay as you use in Golem. But first let me tell you what is Golem and how it works. Golem is a peer-to-peer, fully decentralized network of computing resources with an Ethereum-based marketplace. And how does it work? Well, Golem Network consists of nodes who can be providers, requesters, or even both. Who are then these requesters and providers? Well, requesters post the computation tasks to be executed, and they form the demand side of the market, and providers supply the computing power to execute those tasks. Of course, this doesn't happen exactly for free. Well, the requesters are prepared to pay for the tasks to be computed, and providers supply the resources in the expectation of monetary remuneration, of money. And this economical side of Golem is what I want to talk about today. So there is a bit of math behind all that, but I promise I'm not going to inundate you with big hairy equations, but I rather want to talk about some intuitions behind it. So I want you to start with picturing a familiar situation. You want to hire someone to do some work like writing a program, designing a web page, or something like that. Or on the other hand, you are willing to do this work. Now the important question is this situation, how should we set the price? And this is an issue both for the contractor and for the worker. Now, the two common models in this context are either fixed price for the whole work or an hourly rate, also known as time and materials. So if we look at these pricing models, then it seems that fixed price is saved for contractors, in our case requesters, but it's a big risk for workers when job size is unknown. And if someone posts just computation requests on a peer-to-peer network, there is no way of knowing what the size of this job actually can be. On the other hand, if we look at time and materials, well, the roles are somehow reversed. Now it is more or less safe for workers, because now the workers say how much they have worked and how much they will charge for the job after the job, right? Because fixed price says the price is fixed before the job. And time and material says, well, we set some hourly fee, but at the end, at the end of the day, the contractor, the worker says how many hours or how many units it has worked. So it seems that from the requester point of view, fixed price contracts should always be the choice. But is it really so? Let us look closer at these models again. So if we look at the fixed price model, we can notice some challenges that come with this model. So first of all, the requester has to estimate the size of the job, the value of the job, and errors in this estimate can lead to adverse consequences. Also, the workers, well, obviously the workers have the problem, especially in the decentralized and remote settings. If workers cannot estimate the work at any rate. They just have to, they tell the price without knowing the size of the job. So how are they to bid on the task with unknown size? Well, this is not entirely unfamiliar situation in the real world, because we can do, if you put yourself in the position of a worker that is to do some job. Well, he can make some estimates, but these estimates are often only rough. So what you do if you have to bid on a job of an unknown size? Well, you factor all the risks in your price, so you set a higher price. So that's the problem with well, two big problems for requesters, right? One problem, obvious problem for the workers, but two big problems for requesters. On the other hand, if we look at the time and materials model, well, from the real life works, it's considered generally good for jobs of unknown size. If we cannot estimate the job beforehand, it's generally good to use the time and materials model. If both sides are honest, it's fair to both sides. Of course, the obvious problem with time and material model is the risk of overcharge by dishonest workers. So what happens if the worker charges too much? Well, it seems it's a really big problem, but it's a lesser problem than it seems to be, and even lesser in the decentralized world, because the requester always, remember, it always has the option of not paying at all. And in the decentralized world, if we have no courts, well, the main risk for the requester of not paying is losing the reputation. What does it mean that it loses the reputation? Well, the same worker will not work for the same requester again. But if this worker in question is dishonest, this isn't so bad at all, right? So, I posit that there is appeal in the time and materials model. Of course, we cannot forget about the risk, right? About the problem, and this problem I'm going to talk about today. Let me put this into context of Golem, but even though the model I'm going to talk about today is applicable not only to Golem, but to other situations as well, but it arose in the context of Golem. So far used fixed price contracts for the rendering use case, which has this feature that you can somehow estimate the size of your rendering jobs. Well, these estimates can be off, but you have at least some idea. You have the scene, you know from as a requester at least, you know from the experience how much work is it to render the scene. But as we want to introduce new use cases, such as general WebAssembly computing, we have the need for new billing models. Because the fixed price model has the problem I told you beforehand, that they pose a problem not only for the worker, for the provider, but also for the requester who not necessarily can estimate the job correctly. Okay, so we introduce the new billing model called Pay As You Use, which is a new time and materials billing model for Golem, and in which providers charge for resource consumption. For now, we focus on CPU time, but of course the same model can be applied to other kind of resources and multi-dimensional resources such as used in cloud computing. Okay, so let's come back to the main challenge of time and materials billing. What if providers inflates your resource bill and you get a bill like this, $1 million? Okay, well, one thing that's also known from the brick and mortar, let's say, world of time and material contracts is you set budget limits, right? So it's called time and materials not to exceed. So you say, okay, as many hours as I pay you as many hours as you work, but no more than $1,000. So if you send me a bill for $1 million, I'll tell you to get lost. But this doesn't solve the problem at all, or at least, well, it solves part of the problem. You will not pay $1 million. Okay? But this still creates a risk for the economy as a whole, because there are still perverse incentives. Okay, there is a budget limit of $1,000, let's say. So there is a perverse incentive to always say, okay, I worked for $990, right? So the problem is still not solved. So if we want, because our broader goal is to ensure sustainability of the economy in the long term. So we need to, if not to eliminate the cheaters, because of course we can never eliminate them completely, right? That's how it goes in the society. But we can at least marginalize them, throttling their revenue streams, so it doesn't pay. If it's not profitable for the cheater to cheat, then at least the rational cheaters will not cheat, and they will not. Of course, they will cheat, but they will not earn money on their cheating, or at least not much. But now the question: how to prevent fraud? So, how do we even know we get a bill, right? Remember, we are in this, as a requester, we are in the situation where we don't know an estimate of the job, right? We don't know how much we should pay, or at least how much resources should be used to compute this task. So how do we know that we are cheated at this particular point of time? Well, so it's a quest of information. What is a job worth? So it seems we are coming back to the initial question, right? How to estimate the job? Well, if we are doing this estimation a priori or before the execution, well, we can use some human input. The requester or the user behind the requester tells his estimate of the job, or we can use some ways of algorithmic evaluation. But then we can use fixed price contract. If we can estimate the job a priori, then we can use fixed price contracts. But the trick here is that a posteriori, or after the execution, we have more information, obviously, right? But of course, we need more than one data point, right? If we have just one usage report that we have to evaluate, we have a hard time evaluating if this is too high or not. But if we have more data points, so if similar jobs are executed by many providers in parallel, and this is exactly what happens in Golem, right? Because I'm not going to bore you with the details, but the task is actually split into many subtasks, and these subtasks are executed in parallel. So then we can use this as a source of information and compare resource usages from various providers. Yeah, and what can we do next? So we considered many scenarios. I'm going to talk about 3 of them today. So one, a very simple idea requiring hardly any use of math is what my colleague called the biblical method. So always you have a number of workers, and the one who is worst, you punish him, right? This kind of works, but it's not entirely satisfying. Perversely, it works. The moment it works really bad is if everybody is honest. Everybody is honest, but you still always punish someone because you always punish the worst one. But we have, as I said, if we have tasks of similar size or even identical size performed by various workers, we can do much better. So the second scenario I want to talk is comparable tasks. So we have tasks of similar but not identical size executed by many providers. Then we can collate the resource usage reports from these providers. Sorry. Before I go into this, to tell you the details, I want to tell you a bit about how the offers are compared. Right? Let's say that provider offer prices per resource unit, and we compare these offers. But should we always choose the cheapest one? Right? Not necessarily. Right? Because imagine that we have provider A that says he will work for 1 token per unit, and provider B is willing to work for 2 tokens per unit. Should I always choose A? Well, of course, not necessarily. I need to take their efficiencies into account. So what we do is we assign to the providers numbers called usage factors, which you can think of as amount of resources needed to compute a reference task. And initially, these values can be set via benchmarking or analysis of hardware, or it even works, the schema even works if you set, initially, you set this factor to 1 for everybody. Because the main point is not how they're set initially, because they are not set in stone. They are adjusted and refined every time we get new piece of information, every time we know more about how this particular provider works. And offers are compared by multiplying error times price, so you get this adjusted price and you compare them using this adjusted price. So now this main question is how to adjust this usage factors so we can efficiently, firstly, we can efficiently compare the offers, and we can also eliminate cheaters. So if we have multiple jobs with the same complexity executing at the same time, it's a great source of information. So we can adjust according to the usage reports. But remember that the tasks are only similar and not identical. So we are not going to bluntly adjust to the last usage reports, but it turns out that a better approach is to adjust this usage factors towards the weighted geometrical mean of the previous value and the latest, the value coming from the latest usage report. Another opportunity presents itself if the same task, identical task, is executed by many providers. Of course, to force this just for usage control would be wasteful. But as it turns out, in many scenarios, and especially in the WebAssembly computing, general WebAssembly computing, I mentioned in the beginning, and that was the motivation for this work, is that we validate the results by cross-checking. So the same task is executed by two or more providers. And then because it's the identical task, we can, honest providers should report similar effective usages. Effectiveness modulo the usage factors, these R factors. But if we have a cheater, then we can quickly spot him and penalize him. So we don't need to be as circumspect as in the previous case, no need for the geometric mean. We just set the R to the appropriate value. And if this usage factor exceeds some number, let's say the usage factor exceeds 2, then we blacklist this provider completely. Okay, so we've run discrete event simulations of these scenarios. Discrete event simulations of the market in this and many other scenarios to verify that they really marginalize cheaters. And it turns out that, using either the second or third method, the first method, as I said, is not as effective. So using either comparable tasks or cross-checking or redundancy, as long as the cheaters are in minority, because, we are, of course, susceptible to the 51% attack. If the cheaters are in majority, then we are in a tight spot, even though there are some things we can still try. But if we have something like 30% of the cheaters in the market, then you can see from this graph that they take only, they get only less than 1% of the tasks, and they get around 2.5% revenue. So they are, as I said, they are perhaps not eliminated completely, because we don't want to secure every transaction, but we focus on the stability of the market in the long term. But they are marginalized, and the revenue stream is throttled, so we achieved what we set out to do. But this is, of course, not the end of the road. We're looking at some extensions to the schemes. One promising thing that we are going to evaluate next, or actually started doing, are game theoretic approaches. One of this I wanted to show you is this game when, well, provider doesn't submit the results. Provider submits just the price and the hash of the results. And the requester decides whether he wants the results for this price or not. If he wants the results, the provider gives him the results and the requester pays. If not, the requester does not get the results. Of course, this, even though this seems a very promising thing, remember that the requester still faces the same problem. He has to decide whether the price is right or not. So it seems useful to combine this game theoretic approach with this quantitative approaches I've talked about earlier. So, concluding, the main points I want you to take from these talks are that we want Golem to be a good fit for general computation, such as WebAssembly computation, not only technically, we are of course working on this technical side as well, but also economically, and this is a step in this direction, an important step, I think. So to this end, we propose a simple yet seemingly efficient billing method, pay as you use. We plan to reintroduce this billing method on mainnet together with the WebAssembly use case, and the works on that are ongoing as we speak. And of course, we don't rest our case just yet. We keep improving our solution. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions. Well, I don't think you should compare apples to oranges. You should compare, well, similar tasks to similar tasks, right? Because if you, we tried even if the, well, the type of the task, okay, the type of the task doesn't matter so much, right? But the size of the task, even if you compare rendering tasks, let's say, of various complexity, and you try to apply this kind of methods, you don't, obviously you don't get useful results. But for WebAssembly, let me say, on WebAssembly you can run, well, you could run rendering. Perhaps it wouldn't be very efficient to run rendering on WebAssembly, but things like molecular modeling and so on, and you can compare them, and they are part of one use case. But it's the size, in this case, it's the size that matters.
Yeah, sorry. I had two questions. The first one is you say you blacklist workers when they behave poorly. How do you blacklist on Ethereum where it's as simple as creating a new wallet to create a new identity? And the second question is, what about our requester that is an attacker and proposes a computation and then say, oh, I'm not paying for that, and just wasted time on the worker side?
Yeah, okay, so as the first question, yeah, okay, you cannot blacklist, it's blacklisting to this particular requester, right? Because it's, as I said, it's completely decentralized. So what I'm talking about here is blacklisting from this particular requester. On the other hand, one of the other avenues of this research, which I didn't want to talk, well, didn't really open this avenue because I could talk for hours about this, is distributed reputation, right? But this is definitely in our radar. So the requester, when blacklisting someone, could also tell the neighbors, tell other requester to say, okay, this guy is suspicious. And your second question was, sorry, I forgot your second question.
Yeah, I think this somehow answers also the second question. The thing is, how do you prevent someone to the same requester to come with a new wallet.
You mean like a Sybil attack?
Yes.
That's also another interesting thing, and we have a blog post coming about it, I think, tomorrow. How can a provider, even without distributed reputation, how can a provider adjust to the market conditions, how much jobs are paid and not, and whether he should or should not accept jobs from unknown requesters? So, okay, so read our blog tomorrow. Yeah, it's called the code name Model 0, because we have more models in store, but this simplest model is called Model 0 on the Golem blog. Any more questions?
How stable is your system if attacker is not monetarily interested in the outcome? Like, if the attacker is ready to lose some money to just hurt maybe the system as a whole, how stable is it? How, like, do they need exponentially more money to throw just to hurt you, or is it something which is unstable? They need very little.
If you mean the attacker as being the worker, well, losing money. He just has to perform the job well. And as long as he performs the job well, all's well and good. And actually the system reacts very quickly. So it's, you can picture an attack where someone works like on a distributed, on any reputation system, right? Like someone works very well for a long time in order to build reputation, and then at one moment decides to cash in everything and take all the money. Well, first of all, here is nothing to cash. Here is one small job, so he can cheat you only for a small amount of money and has to put big amounts of money up front. And then again, paradoxically, the better he works at first, the faster he will be excluded when he misbehaves, right? Because he has a very good usage factor, right? And when the usage usage reported and at this attack time is very different from what is expected from his usage factor, he gets blacklisted immediately. So no, I don't think it's susceptible to this kind of attack, but of course we can talk and we can analyze all other scenarios. I'll be very eager to do that. Any more questions? No, then thank you very much. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank my colleagues as well. Thank you.